Dear lovely internet viewer, I'm sorry for the horrible blue brains I must have caused you. I realize it's hard to get through a 16-minute video without a satisfying release at the end. But today will be different. Today, I'll stroke that giant curious brain of yours until you're happy and content. I'm going to give your mind the largest knowledge explosion it's ever had. I promise. All my love, Grant. In case you're completely confused as to what my love letter was about, you've obviously not seen the first part of this video, which we released earlier in the week. And if you haven't, I forgive you. Perhaps you weren't ready to be spoiled about the plot of Chapter 5. If so, you also should refrain from this video. You've been warned. However, today is not an ordinary video. Oh no, I'm going to be revealing the true nature behind Bendy and the ink machine. Every question, every message, everything revealed with the one key that will tie it all together. The writings on the walls, the film reel at the end, the conversation with Joey, all of it comes together to form one singular truth. So if you haven't seen the first part of this video, go watch it right now! It's essential to setting up everything I'm about to discuss. For those of you who have already seen it, prepare yourself for a tale of wrongdoing and one man's journey to fix it. For an infinite adventure and the explanation behind it. This isn't just any Bendy video. This is the moment you'll finally understand absolutely everything. This is the epic conclusion to a mysterious tragedy revealed over the past year. This is Bendy and the Ink Machine, the story you never knew. Alright, Ink Storians, let's begin. Last video, we left off explaining that Henry's journey through Joey Drew Studios is none other than a time loop. I'll give you a quick refresher on how we came to this conclusion. Henry ends the game opening Joey's door and finding himself at the entrance of Joey Drew's studios, returning to the start of Chapter 1, hence it being a loop. It ends in the same spot it begins. In addition to that, the hidden writings in Henry's cell from Chapter 5 are obviously Henry talking to himself, crossing things out using arrows to help other Henrys down the line. Henry's loop explains how those writings appear in the first place and know exactly what's going to happen to you in the future. Henry is helping future versions of himself as he goes. This is backed up by the dozens upon dozens of tally marks at the beginning of Chapter 1. These tally marks represent all the times Henry has gone through this loop. Still on the same page? Cool! Now let's get into some new information. The Meatly didn't just use a time loop as a cop-out for not having an ending, which is what a ton of people seem to think. No, in fact, this time loop is not the answer, but a clue as to what is happening. It's not a question, it's part of the key. Keep that in mind. We're going to return to it shortly. Now let's discuss the paradoxes within Bendy. I'm sure I just confused many of you by saying there's a paradox in Bendy.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Yet if you're looking closely, it's obvious that parts of this game cannot possibly happen in the same plane of existence. I'm referring to the entirety of the journey through the studio in contrast to the ending with Joey. You see, in the ending, if we take our time snooping around before going to talk to Joey, we'll undoubtedly notice the bulletin board on the left-hand side of his living room. This board has bankruptcy notices and overdue bills, but among the jumble are two letters, one from Allison Pendle, who's now named Allison Connor, and the other is from Wally Franks. According to Allison's letter, she's doing extremely well as a voice actress, and Tom, who we can infer from her last name is now her husband, is also doing well, and also isn't a dog, and she isn't an angel. It's obvious this isn't her first message back and forth. In fact, she wrote, "I'll send you another recipe soon," implying that they've been writing for a while and are decent friends. On the other hand, Wally Franks' letter makes it obvious they haven't talked in a while and that Wally is doing well in Florida, has his own handyman service, and actually left the studio before it ever closed. We know this letter was written years after the studio closed down, since he wrote, "It was a big surprise getting a letter from you after all these years." Now, tell me, how can these letters exist when we know Allison is good Alice? They can't. It's logically impossible. So if Allison can't be an ink angel and a successful voice actress from Archgate Films at the same time, what does this mean? Well, let's take another look at Joey's drawing board. storyboard. Just a glance at what Joey has been working on tells us a lot. He's been storyboarding the entire journey of the game. He's drawn out Evil Bendy, the pipe weapon we use, the rickety pulley cart from Chapter 4, the Bendy ride before the brute Boris fight, Alice cutting open Boris, the projectionist, the ink machine, all of it. It's quite clear Joey has been storyboarding the entire journey we just played through. Do you understand what the game is saying? Bendy and the ink machine didn't happen in real life. No, Bendy and the ink machine isn't real. I'm not saying it's a dream. I'm not saying it's a meme. I'm saying it's a film created by Joey Drew. Finally got off your butt and picked up a pen yourself, huh, Joey? Living up to that name. It's all right here on his drawing board. And if you're skeptical, the evidence is overwhelming. First off, let's acknowledge the stylistic change between the game and Joey's place. It's blatantly obvious the actual game is meant to look like an animation, whereas the ending was created to look like real life. Just look at Joey's wrinkles. This change is imperative to understanding the timeline for Bendy and the ink machine. Most people assume it starts with Chapter 1, and it ends at the sit-down with Joey. But what if it begins by talking with Joey? Henry talks with Joey after not seeing him for 30 years. Joey states his regrets for how he lived his life. Then he says,
"Henry, come visit the old workshop. There's something I need to show you."
And the game begins. What's happening here is Joey and Henry reconnecting after 30 years and Joey wanting to show Henry something at the studio. Joey wants Henry to go with him to the studio so he can show Henry the movie before it's released. Henry was the creator of Bendy, and Joey wants to make things right by him. So he invited Henry to come see what he created before he ever released it to the public. The gameplay of Bendy is us playing through the story of the film. So to put it in order chronologically, Joey and Henry work together at Joey Drew Studios. Henry leaves, the studio goes under. 30 years pass and Joey decides to create one more animation. An animation in the setting of his old studio, creating a story based on the past that expands into fiction. He storyboards it out and then invites Henry back to the studio so Joey can show Henry his creation. The gameplay of Bendy that we play through is the movie itself. Not only does this make complete sense, it answers all the questions of how this can be a time loop and how Allison and Wally are sending letters to Joey. Everyone left when the studio went under. Everything that happens during the game within the studio is part of the story on the film. Think about this idea in terms of how the ink demon is defeated. All Henry needed to do was show it the end of the film. The ending is a clue that the entire thing was a movie all along. The ink demon can't continue if it's over. Didn't it strike you as odd that just a clip showing the end defeated Bendy? It didn't make any sense unless the entire story is just a film loop. Then when the end is on screen, the story is over, aka Bendy is over. But that's not all the clues in the game. Remember at the beginning of Chapter 5 when we talked to Allison, she says,
"1 minute, we don't even exist. Just thoughts. And the next minute, this place."
This is another clue to the entire game being an animation. Allison knew she didn't exist, that she was just a thought. Couple that with Henry's earlier recording.
"There's a secret hiding in the shadows. I just feel like I'm being watched. There's something at work here."
Yes, Henry, you're absolutely right. The secret is that this is all a cinematic adventure. You're being watched by Joey as he creates the story. He's the hidden being that is at work. But wait, there's more. During the ending scene after the credits, we hear a little girl ask Uncle Joey to tell her another story.
"Tell me another one, Uncle Joey."
Now, whether or not he was telling her the story of Bendy and the ink machine is irrelevant. What we should be focusing on is the picture. Congratulations on your success, your best pal, Henry. Think about what we know regarding Joey's past. Joey was not successful. We just saw bankruptcy notices and overdue bills in his living room. So what success is Henry congratulating Joey on? The success of the blockbuster hit Bendy and the ink machine. Put this in the timeline as the finale, and you have the entire story from beginning to end. Joey is a pompous snack hole who treated his employees like crap, including his good friend Henry, who was the main animator for Bendy. When Henry left the company, Joey had to hire multiple people to fill his place.
Looks like they knocked out a wall or two after I left. Guess it took a few people to replace me.
The studio eventually failed. Joey and Henry fell out of touch for 30-ish years. Joey, now old and wheelchair-ridden, reflected on his past and realized the mistakes he made. He screwed over his good friend and many of the people who worked for him, and he decided that instead of living with regret, he'd make amends by making something that's a metaphor for how he feels. So he creates a story about the past, creating characters from the people in his life from his time at the studio. As we see, he storyboards it out and makes changes along the way. We only get 5 pages out of hundreds that went into this storyboard. Notably, he changes the ending from Bendy crushing the end to Bendy being defeated by the end. Upon finishing his film, he invites Henry back to the studio to view it being the gameplay within the studio. This cinematic masterpiece becomes popular. Joey finally achieves the success he desired all those years ago. And Henry sends him a signed picture congratulating Joey on finally achieving what he always wanted. It's not possible to prove, but it's likely that the girl we hear at the end is Henry's daughter, signifying the relationship rekindled between the two. We know Joey is old, he still won't have a family, but Henry has Linda, who we can assume is his wife.
There's not much left to say except, Linda, I miss you, and I love you so much.
And it's possible they have a kid, and their kid's called Joey Uncle Joey, like many children do for good friends of the parents. This fact that it's an animation also explains how the ink machine can be in Joey's house and not in the studio. It's tiny compared to the studio ink machine, which actually changed size multiple times throughout Bendy. It was all a film showing how Joey feels about who he was during that time in his life. A monster seeing employees as no more than tools for his needs and destroying his studio in the process. And if you're somehow still not on board with this idea, the Meatly even put in hints like the double Henry desks to push us towards this idea. Why would Henry's desk appear in Chapter 1 and again in a different place in Chapter 5? It makes no sense, and that's exactly the point. This is a continuity error, something that happens all the time in movies and TV. Something small is moved or changed from scene to scene and isn't caught by the filmmakers, so it makes it into the final release. Stuff like this scene from Spider-Man where Peter breaks a lamp and then in the next scene it's perfectly fine. This second reveal of Henry's desk, the ending, the after-credit scene, the storyboarding, the letters, Allison's words, Henry's recordings, all of it comes together perfectly to explain what Bendy and the Ink Machine really is. It's not a game, it's a movie from Joey to Henry. That's the story of one man's wrongdoing and his journey to make it right, of an infinite adventure and the explanation behind it. That's the story behind Bendy and the Ink Machine. The story you never knew. But that's not all I have to say about Bendy. You might have noticed I left out a fairly major part of the story, the seeing glass and all the hidden messages from Chapter 1 through Chapter 5. Oh yes, there's even more hidden within this game's story. So don't forget to hit that bell so you get notified for the next video, because we're taking this even one step further next time. And besides that, you should catch us streaming at twitch.tv/Treesicle. We hang out, play games, answer questions, and we do it every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, which means we're probably streaming right now!
It went from Bendy and the ink machine to Bendy and the drink machine. The trick is to get your drink, put some ice in it, pour it in. Okay, I think we go crazy.
I'm also drinking Jameson out of a little teacup because we ran out of whiskey glasses. We forgot to turn on the dishwasher before we started streaming. That's the bachelor life, people.
Twitch.tv/Treesicle is the place to be. And for today, that's all. I hope I left you feeling blown and satisfied. That came out wrong. Bye!